So chapter 16, appraisals. This chapter, we're going to learn about valuation. So we're going to describe the differences among various types of value. The theory of valuation we'll go over, explaining the three approaches to value, and discuss the profession of appraising. So we'll start off with the term real estate market. Well, what is a market? It's a place where goods can be bought and sold. Prices can be established, and it becomes advantageous for buyers and sellers as a place they could come together to buy, trade, and sell goods. Now, real estate's an imperfect market because you can't take the goods to the marketplace where the people meet. You have to take the shoppers out to where the goods are because it's real estate. You can't pick it up and bring it out. You get it? All right. There are 5 attributes of land. It's finite in its supply, meaning there's no new land being created. It's physically immobile. Can't pick it up, put it in a better area. It's durable. It'll last forever. You can drop a bomb on it. It's still good. It has its own unique location and characteristics, and it's useful to people. In order for it to have value, it has to be useful. Supply and demand is the amount of goods offered for sale within the market at a given price during any given period of time. And demand is the number of people willing and able to accept the available goods at any given price during any given period of time. So when supply increases, prices will generally drop. And when demand increases, prices will rise or remains constant as that supply dwindles. So this principle states that the value of a property increases if the supply of such property decreases and the demand for it either increases or remains constant, and vice versa. That means the opposite is true as well. So value is the monetary worth of goods, products, or services offered in the marketplace at any given time. And value means 100%. Anytime we're trying to calculate value, we're trying to calculate all of it. So value, therefore, means 100%. And it can be described as the present worth of future benefits. And value does not remain the same over time. It varies as the market changes. And, here's that tip I gave you guys already to sharpen your valuation skills and knowledge. Take a class that's taught by a group of appraisers, the Ottawa group there. They teach those CMA workshops, and when they're not teaching the workshops in between during the year, you could take their seasonal workshops, which touch on CMAs, but they also give you market forecasts, which is great to have, to be an informed agent. Yeah, this is the real estate values as seen during tax time by the homeowner, right? They're like, no, my house is like this. The tax man looks at it like that. And when it's time for them to sell their house, though, all of a sudden they look at it like that. They all of a sudden believe the tax man's valuation. So the value can be described as the present worth of future benefits arising from the ownership of real property. So let's highlight that. Right. Situs, that's the people's preference for a particular location. And what are the three major factors affecting value of real estate? Location, location, and what's that last one? Oh, yeah, location. So let's highlight that on page 307. Situs. Or I like to pronounce it situs, because once we find that perfect location we want to build our home on and live at, we say we're going to sit us right here. Even though it's pronounced situs, situs helps me remember what it is. People's preference for location. And here's a historical photo when the government was still giving land away. This is a picture, an original photo from the Oklahoma land rush. Got a little video for you to watch about that from the movie featuring Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise called Far and Away.
The Homestead Act became law in 1862 when it was signed by President Abraham Lincoln. U.S. citizens could get 160 acres of unoccupied land west of the Mississippi River and east of the Rocky Mountains. They could keep it if they lived on the land for 5 years and made improvements to the land. Around 50,000 people lined up to claim around 2 million acres of prime land. At high noon, they were allowed to enter the area and claim the land. This is an actual photo from that day courtesy of the McClenny Family Picture Album. Homesteading was a great opportunity for many people, especially immigrants just moving to the United States. Anyone who was over 21 years old could own land. This included former slaves, immigrants, and single women. Some people snuck onto the land early and hid in order to lay claim to the best areas of land first. These people were nicknamed Sooners. Today, the mascot for the University of Oklahoma is the Sooner.
Basically,
around 10,000 homesteaders settled around the area that is today Oklahoma City. The next day, April 23, 1889, the city was established with a population of over 10,000 people. It would later become the capital of the state of Oklahoma. Interesting facts about the Homestead Act and the land rush. Northerners wanted the land to be developed by small farmers rather than the large plantation owners from the South. They were afraid the plantation owners would use slaves to farm the land. There was an $18 fee to file the application to get a plot of land. Later Homestead Acts allowed for 320 acres in areas for dry land farming and 640 acres for ranching. By 1934, 270 million acres of land had been given away by the United States government. Homesteading ended in 1976, except in Alaska where it ended in 1986. In the book Little House on the Prairie, Laura Ingalls' dad claims a homestead in Kansas. The following is a reenactment of the Oklahoma land rush that happened on April 22, 1889. The movie is called Far and Away, featuring Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise.
Go. That's an example of situs there. Going to pick out their prime spot where they build the home when the government was giving away land. All you got to do is claim it and file that application fee.
Thanks for watching.
There you go. Thanks for watching. Okay, so the 4 economic characteristics to value. Dust. Demand, utility, scarcity, and transferability. Demand means there's a need or desire by someone who could afford it. and is willing to buy the land. Utility means that it's serving a human need or desire. Scarcity means it's limited in its supply, no new land being created. And transferability, the ownership should be easily transferable. Otherwise, the value is not going to be there. So which one of these four economic characteristics of value would apply to the situation? A builder that just built 500 homes in the area, and you want to get a permit to put up a combination laundromat convenience store. Your situation would, which of the four economic characteristics would apply to it the most? You guys listening? Thinking?
Is it utility?
Utility, serving a human need or desire. You got 500 homes in the area. You're going to need a laundromat and convenience store, right? So yeah, utility would be correct. Okay. Now, what is an appraisal? It's an unbiased estimate or opinion of value based on supportable evidence using approved methods by a licensed appraiser. Appraising is a profession that requires licensure. It's an appraiser is an independent person. They don't work for the lender. They're selected by the lender, and the buyer pays their fee. But they're trained to provide an unbiased estimate or opinion of value based on supportable evidence and using certain approved methods and theories. So let's highlight this on page 307 about market value and an appraisal. And let me know when you have it so that I can move on to the next slide. Everybody get that?
I have it.
All right, so appraising is a profession that requires licensing, and you start off first as an apprentice trainee. You have to take a 90-hour class and pass an exam to become an apprentice trainee. And then you got to work as an apprentice trainee for a while before you could become a licensed residential appraiser. New Jersey students must complete a 150-hour additional class time and have 2,000 hours of experience in no fewer than 12 months as an apprentice trainee to become a licensed residential appraiser. Now, licensed residential appraisers are limited to only appraising residential properties under $1 million. Now, the next step up would be to become a certified residential appraiser. This would require a college degree of an associate's degree, and nothing in particular. Could be gender studies. This is one of those stupid requirements that were put in place by politicians to act like they were doing something after the market crashes by blaming the appraisers now. They blamed us, they blamed the attorneys, now they're blaming the appraisers, but couldn't possibly be the politicians' fault. So they put in more stringent requirements to become an appraiser, requiring a degree in whatever. Or you could substitute that with 21 semester credits in English, economics, math, business, or law. The students must also complete 200 hours in approved appraisal courses and have 2,500 hours of experience in a period of at least 24 months. Then certified residential appraisers have no limitation on the value of the properties they can appraise for residential 1 to 4 family zone properties. Now, can certified residential appraisers appraise commercial property at all? Only under the supervision of a certified general appraiser. And they're going to need that experience because to become a certified general appraiser, you have to have a bachelor's degree or higher, or could substitute 30 credits in previously mentioned courses, as well as 2 electives in accounting, geography, AG economics, business management, or real estate, in addition to 300 more hours of classroom time, and have at least 3,000 hours of experience in 2.5 years or more, with at least half of that, 1,500 hours, should be in appraising non-residential properties. So unlike a residential appraiser, certified general appraisers have no monetary caps on the types of properties or the types of properties that they could, or restrictions on the types of properties that they could appraise. In every case, the required course of study must include a 15-hour national USPAP course. Stands for Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. You can liken that to the classes real estate agents take to become members of NAR. We have to take those Code of Ethics training classes. Well, appraisers take MAI. They become members of MAI, where we become members of NAR. NAR members take Code of Ethics training class every 3 years, and appraisers take a national USPAP class every 2 years, 15-hour class. Okay, you guys got those highlights?
So who are the appraisers? Who do they work for?
They're independent workers. The banks would select them from a list of licensed appraisers, send them out to do appraisals, because the banks need an unbiased estimate or opinion of value before they go out and lend money. They want to make sure that the property is worth enough to serve as collateral for the loan they're giving.
Right. So if you wanted to become an appraiser, you would just have to find an independent person that is willing to have you work with them for this number of months or years that you need to do this.
No, if you go out to get a loan to buy a house, for example.
No, sorry. So if you decide you want to be an appraiser,
okay,
you have to get all of these hours in as, an intern or whatever you just called it on the other page. I'm not sure what you said. You just have, you as a person would have to go as an apprentice trainee. So you would have to go find an appraiser and say, I want to, I'm taking these courses. Can I work with you for these 2,000 hours or 3,000 hours? That's
Correct.
how you do it?
Correct.
Okay. Correct. Do they pay you while you're an apprentice or no?
Yeah, you get paid something, but you're basically a gopher.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. All right, so here I summarized it onto one slide. Appraisers, MAI and USPAP, you need to know what those are for exam. As long as you know that they have something to do with appraising, my understanding is you'll get the question right. I'm not sure how it's worded, but that's how it was explained to me. But I just told you what it is. Realtors become members of NAR, appraisers become members of MAI, the member of the Appraisal Institute. Realtors take the Realtor Code of Ethics training class. Appraisers take USPAP, the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice class. Okay, and you start off at that apprentice trainee, then you graduate on to a licensed residential appraiser, but you're caps at $1 million and only residential properties. Certified residential appraiser there is no cap on the value of properties they can appraise. And they can only appraise residential properties or commercial properties under the supervision of a certified general appraiser who can appraise anything, residential, commercial, and no monetary caps. So, that being said, what kind of license is required to perform an appraisal? It's one of those simple, stupid answers. What kind of license is required to perform an appraisal?
An appraisal license?
An appraiser's license, yeah. Yeah, I just went over all these different types of licenses, so a lot of times people focus on those, but it's just general. In general, it's an appraiser's license. Now, if I were to ask you a question like, well, what kind of license is required to appraise a residential property valued at $1.2 million, you would say,
Is it the certified general?
certified residential or certified general. Because they could both appraise properties over $1 million.
Oh, they can both, okay. One's residential, one's commercial, but they can both go over. So once you become certified, you can appraise over $1 million.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, if I ask you a question about, if it's a mixed use property and it's over $1 million, what kind of license is required? It would be a certified general appraiser. Because only a general appraiser can appraise commercial properties. However, a certified residential appraiser can do it also if they're under the supervision of a certified general appraiser.
What if it's a mixed use property under $1 million? You don't have to be certified.
Well, it's still commercial, so certified general appraiser.
Okay.
So you'll get some kind of question on exam like that. So you got to understand the different types of appraiser licenses, what they get appraised. So this slide is good enough with the information you need to know for that. Okay. Okay for me to change the slide, or is somebody snapping a picture over there? All right. So market value is a price that a ready, willing, and able buyer who's not forced to buy will pay a seller who's not forced to sell. It's the most probable price the property will bring. It's based on supportable evidence. Payments have to be made in cash or its equivalent, like a mortgage loan. It has to have had a reasonable length of exposure to the market. And both the buyer and seller have to be acting without undue pressure. And both parties must be well informed about the property's assets, defects, and potential. So the valuation is estimated by a real estate licensee or a licensed appraiser. And market value assumes an arm's length transaction. Oh, another term there. What's an arm's length transaction, you may be asking? Well, good question, because you'll need to know. An arm's length transaction is a transaction between parties who are relatively strangers to one another. Each of them are trying to do the best for themselves. In other words, you're not selling the property to your sister. What are the odds that you sell your property to your sister that you're going to give her a break on the price? Pretend there's no family drama and you love your sister. The odds are pretty good, right? So the arm's length transaction, that's not an arm's length transaction that can be used to value other properties, because this property is not a reflection of the true market value. Because if you're selling it to a family member, the odds are you're going to give them a break on the price. So there's it's not an arm's length transaction. You can only use arm's length transactions to value other properties. Otherwise, it's not a true reflection of the market value. Okay.
I have a random question. So when you're looking at properties and it says other homes like sold close by that are comparable, if somebody
Uh-huh.
did sell it to, if somebody did sell it to a family member and they sold it for a lower price,
Yep.
that's the price that's going to show, right?
Yeah, but the appraiser has to try to ascertain whether there were whether it was an arm's length transaction or not. Look at the names
Okay.
of the people, see if they're possibly related by name. And sometimes they call up real estate agents and they ask them, is this an arm's length transaction? Was there any seller concessions to help pay for closing costs or give money back to the buyer? Because if there was, then the actual sale price that's listed is not what the seller actually got, because they gave some of it back to the buyer to make the deal happen. So the value would actually be a little lower than what the sale price that's listed is. So they got to do a little more research in addition to just finding the sale prices and what properties have sold for.
Got it.
You get
Okay.
that true reflection of value. All right, so let's do the highlights on that now. Market value, arm's length transaction, and market price. In a perfect world, the market price and the market value and the market price are one and the same. The market price is what the property actually sells for. It's the selling price. Just let me know when you guys got the highlights.
I got it.
Okay, everybody good?
That's all good. Yep.
All right. Cost relates to the past, price relates to the present, and value relates to the future. And you can look at that just by talking to people. Sometimes when I sell a property, they're like, yeah, but it cost me this much to do this improvement. Well, nobody cares how much it cost you in the past. They care about what it's worth today, right? So market value is an estimate based on the analysis of comparable sales, based on solid data, evidence, to calculate the projected sale price, which is the current value. So market price is the selling price. And in a perfect world, the market value and the market price are one and the same. It's what the property actually sells for. It's the eventual selling price. And the cost is the total fee to construct or make improvements. And it has little to do with the current value of a property, unless it's new construction, of course, then it has more to do with it. But buyers don't care what improvements cost. They care about the current value. And I've even had new construction that failed to sell, drove a new builder out of business because he overpriced it based on his costs and how much he wanted to get. So we know this, not all improvements will pay for themselves. You got to spend your money wisely. You can look at that, just look, does the in-ground pool increase the value of the property? Yeah. Does it pay for itself? Probably not. You're not going to recoup all the money from some of the improvements. Solar panels, remodeling the kitchen, that probably pays off the best. Up to a certain point, though. We have something called increasing and diminishing returns. You know, you'll get all your money back up to a certain point, but then when you start going overboard with the improvements, your return starts to diminish. You're not going to get all that money back when you go extreme with those kitchen makeovers, for example. Okay? The highest and best use is the most profitable or current use or use in demand in the reasonably near future. Amenity is a tangible or intangible benefit to the property, like clean air or nice views. Those are intangible. You can't touch clean air or a nice view. But it does add value, right? Having a beautiful beachfront property view, right? Or a mountain view. Or to have convenience features like pools, jacuzzis, heated floors, or heated toilet seat, or a bidet, or high-end appliances, custom features, etc. These are all amenities. That swimming pool, it's an amenity. Now, the theory of substitution says that the value set by cost of purchasing a similar substitute property. So basically, if you have two homes with the same location and attributes, the less expensive one sells first. Why? Because nobody will pay more if the same can be had for less. Let's do those highlights on this slide. Maybe write those notes there on the side. Good. Just let me know when you get all those notes.
All right.
Okay. Here's the theory of substitution. You got three homes for sale, exactly the same size, style, location, amenity. They're all corner properties. Which one would you buy? Home 1, 2, or 3 in this example?
One,
1. Why?
because it's the least expensive.
Yeah, it's cheaper. Well, if they're all exactly the same, why would you pay more for the same? Right? So nobody will pay more if the same can be had for less. And you're not the only one that thought that way, and somebody beat you to the punch. Now, which one would you buy?
Two.
Yeah, 2. So that's the theory of substitution. That's how that works. That the cost is set by purchasing another substitute property. That's how the theory of substitution works. Now, somebody beat you to that one. Now you'd be for 3, but 3 is probably going to sell for more than the asking price because the supply is dwindling, but the demand is still there. So this is probably going to sell for even more. And that's a good segue to supply and demand. All right. All right, so supply and demand is the value of a property increases if the supply decreases and the demand either increases or remains constant, and vice versa is also true. And conformity, if a property is not conforming to the neighborhood, you'll never get your money back. It makes no sense to have the best house on the block because you'll never get your money back. It's good for yourself to show off a little bit, but having a mansion in the middle of a poor to middle class neighborhood, I mean, you're gonna have a tough time selling it, because most people looking for mansions aren't gonna be looking to buy them in a poor or middle class neighborhood. They're gonna want them in the more richy areas, right? Same thing is if you have a house that does not conform to the neighborhood. It sticks out like a sore thumb. Whether it's having a mansion in the middle of a poor neighborhood, or if you have a single family house surrounded by multifamily houses, it's non-conforming to the neighborhood. Or you get these neighborhoods that are just single family next to a multifamily next to a storefront. Nothing is conforming there. In non-conforming neighborhoods, the values of the real estate do not maintain as well. This is why most of the time you go to neighborhoods, they're all even the same kinds of houses with the same kinds of architectural styles. The lot sizes are even approximately, give or take a little bit, the same size. Okay, because conformity maintains value better. And that's why if you buy in a condominium complex, they got rules about, how you decorate the outside and, painting your front door a certain color. They want everything to be conforming. So we don't got one unit that sticks out like a sore thumb, and then everybody starts to do their own thing, and the neighborhood does not conform anymore and doesn't maintain its value as well. So that's another reason why condominium complexes have these rules in place to try to preserve the values. Regression, if the value drops when in the neighborhood all around you, it's going to bring down your value. Values drop when neighborhoods around you fall apart. Even if you maintain your house, and your house is the beautiful, meticulously maintained, but all around you, it's becoming a slum. It's going to affect your value, right? All the homes start getting boarded up and foreclosed, but your house is beautiful. You got it maintained very nice. Yeah, but with regression like this, if the whole neighborhood's regressing, it's going to drag down your value as well. You got that theory like the tides. Think of the ships in the rising and falling tides, right? All ships fall with the tide when the tide goes out, and all ships rise when the tide comes in. So that's how regression as well as progression works. You could have a neighborhood where everybody's improving and fixing up their houses, but yours is just an old house that's fallen apart and you've done nothing to it. Your house is still increasing in value because the neighborhood around you is progressing. It's getting built up. So once again, that ships rise with the tide and fall with the tide theory comes into play of regression and progression. And then in anticipation, did you guys hear what they're building down the road? That's anticipation. So anticipation, people could gamble with the price of real estate in anticipation of something happening in the area. Something is moving in or out of the area that could increase the value of the real estate. So people will buy up the area in anticipation, but it's a gamble still. And here's an example of that. In my town of Linden, years ago, they were going to build a NASCAR racetrack here. The city council approved it. They got the funding in place for it. They just couldn't get NASCAR to sanction one race there. So a NASCAR racetrack without a NASCAR race is simply a racetrack. And we didn't just need another racetrack around here. So that put the kibosh on that deal happening. And surprising, Linden does have a history with NASCAR. Here's their airport. They had races going on there. Here's some historic tickets and the races. You can see at the airport itself was used as a racetrack, an early NASCAR racetrack. This shows you who the racers were and what places they came in. Stock car races. You can see the Linden Airport hangar there in the background with the grandstand seats over here. People were racing around the airport. Look at those race cars. Not exactly like state-of-the-art things you see today, but NASCAR is basically stock car racing. At least it keeps the look of stock car. So here's an aerial overview of it even today. Yeah, the runway.
We can only see the definition.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. Shut off my Bluetooth. Getting a lot of calls lately for final burial expenses for some reason. Trying to tell me something? All right. So here you see some speedway history in the town of Linden, what I was talking about. All right. Here's one of the tickets. Here was the race track layout and all the entries and the places they came in, the different flags that would be called on the race, what they mean. Here you can see the Linden Airport hangar in the background with the grandstand seats there. Yes, this fellow was the winner. Yeah. Look at that event ticket there. General admission, $1 with tax included. Wow. And that's just the overview of the airport. Still got that racetrack. The runways around it were used as the racetrack. And then we got this other NASCAR forum here that basically talks about there was an approval there. There was an approval there for a 100,000 seat grandstand, expandable to 140,000 seat, 0.92 mile, almost a mile speedway, and a 400,000 square foot entertainment center, and a 20-story hotel and conference center that was supposed to be built by the developer Morton Saltine. You had all kinds of celebrities involved with that, like Paul Newman, Mario Andretti, and the Democratic political operative James Carville. He's a dinosaur now. The others are dead. But they never got the approval from NASCAR to have a race there. They were even going to put an exit ramp from the turnpike right onto Wood Avenue in Linden. Because otherwise, the closest speedway is in Watkins Glen in the Poconos. Interesting. But in anticipation of that getting built, people started buying up all the marshland that was previously worthless there. It was all flood zone and, marshland where they were going to build a NASCAR racetrack. in anticipation of that happening, people started tripping over themselves buying those properties. But that's a gamble, though, anticipation, especially since it was dependent on so many things. And NASCAR didn't grant the race, so they scrapped the deal. And then people were stuck with these properties in the marshland. I even got on the deal. I didn't buy real estate there, but I found out what they were going to call the raceway. And I'm the proud owner of libertyspeedway.com. That's what they were going to call it. So I bought a little intellectual property, see, the domain name. All right, so some theoretical principles of value. Increasing and diminishing returns, like I explained, you remodel your kitchen, you'll get all your money back up to a certain point. You start going extreme with the kitchen makeover, the return on that investment is going to start decreasing. So you get your return will increase up to a certain point, and then when you start going extreme with that kitchen makeover, it starts to diminish the money that you'll get back on it. So, not everybody needs like that 100 bottle wine cooler in their kitchens. I know I've had some ladies argue with me on that one, but all right. Contribution. How do you spend your money? And are you spending money to put back into the real estate? Can have an effect on the value. Any additions that could increase the value possibly, or the absence of any improvements could actually decrease the value if it's just getting old, and not being updated. Competition can play a role in the value, the theory of competition. Profits attract competition. Excess profits attract ruinous competition to an area, right? When we're looking at like commercial investment type properties. And change in market conditions, jobs, political, overregulation by the government, crime rates rising or falling, high taxes, improvements to an area or contamination in an area, the industry, the local industry, weather, flood zones and the remapping of the flood zones, and the local economy. These things all can affect the value of the real estate in the area. I mean, just look at what's going on in New York City right now. Last couple of years, you've had people in office there, and the way that they're politically how they run it, they're going after law-abiding citizens to who tried to protect somebody on a train, and then they prosecute them for murder, right? Or the bodega owner who's getting robbed and ends up killing the robber, and then they go after him. And now law enforcement's not doing anything because they tried to go after law enforcement and penalize law enforcement, because, criminal justice system's inherently racist, and also, they go after the cops instead of the criminals. And now crime expands. You get people walking down the street just randomly knocking women and old people out, beating people up and robbing them. Drug use is pervasive. And it's not a good place to start raising your kids or to have family. So you're getting people that are actually moving out of the area because of those crimes. You're seeing real estate prices going down. You're seeing the taxes going up. So people are looking to get the hell out of Dodge. So that kind of change will affect people. They'll move. Look at what's going on in California. The same nonsense in California. When you could rob a store in broad daylight and not get arrested, as long as you keep your robbery value to less than $900 or whatever it is, or $1,200 or whatever their max is there, and you don't get prosecuted. Now you got people coming in, clearing out stores and robbing them. Those businesses don't want to stay in business. So now they move out, they shut down, big shocker. And then they And then they get that big accusation that because they're moving out of areas, everybody says once again, it's a racist thing for them to move their convenience store out of a town, out of an area. Where are people going to shop? Well, the politicians should have thought about that when they were letting criminals rob the stores and get away with it, right? Has nothing to do with race, has to do with crime. Businesses, stores, they need to stay in business, and that's the argument that politicians on some sides of the aisle will make, which doesn't make sense at all. It has to deal with the safety of people and the business and its assets, but if you let it become the Wild West, well, people will move. Even those actors and rich and famous people, they're even starting to move. They're even relocating Hollywood to New Jersey, moving it on the East Coast Hollywood. Hopefully they don't bring the crime and other nonsense with them, even though we're seeing a uptick in those types of robberies now here in New Jersey. We just had one the other day. I seen yesterday on the news. A store was broken and robbed in broad daylight. You had a group of people that just walked into a store of high-end pocketbooks and just started pulling everything down and walking out with all the goods. Now, then they'll probably go on eBay and try to sell them on Facebook Marketplace and eBay. It's ridiculous. Okay, so there's three approaches to value. The sales comparison approach, also known as the comparative approach. And we determine the value by doing a CMA or a BPO for the banks or an appraisal by a licensed appraiser. Then we have the cost approach and then the income approach. So for now, let's just know what are the three approaches to value. So highlight them there on page 310. Sales comparison, cost approach, and the income approach. You'll get a question just on that. You have to know the three approaches to value. And then we'll go over each one of those. Okay, everybody got that? So the sales comparison approach, also called the market data approach, is an estimate of value that's obtained by comparing the subject property to the property that's under appraisal. With recently sold similar properties, we call comparables or comps for short. Now, this is the approach most often used by brokers and salespeople. You get a question on an exam like that. Which of the three approaches? What are the three approaches to value, and which is the approach to value that's most often used by salespeople? There you go, sales comparison approach. And you determine the value of a subject property you're trying to value by comparing it to other recently sold similar properties, similar in size, style, location, amenity, condition, and age, to determine the value of the property. So we compare it to those similar properties that have recently sold, and then make adjustments for the differences to get the closest good valuation possible. So once again, you could either have your brokers give you training, or you can take the training from licensed appraisers, which is a pretty good idea. Here at that Ottawa class, they got those workshops. Take their CMA workshop. Best for residential property valuation is those CMA. You compare the subject properties, similar comparables or comps that have recently sold, similar in size, style, location, amenity, age, and condition, that have recently sold, comparing it to the subject property, and then you make adjustments for the differences to determine the value. Okay. Now, You can also make adjustments based on time, the date of sale. You got to recently sold properties you have to compare it to, and if it's not within the last 3 months, you have to start making adjustments for time, because the real estate market 3 months, 6 months, a year or more ago was a different place altogether. So you got to compare it to the price of homes that have recently sold, or make the adjustments for how the market changed as well into your valuation. You have to bring that into consideration. So the location should be relatively the same, definitely in the same municipality. You're determining the value of a house. You can't compare it to another house that's close by, but it's in a neighboring town. Like some properties across the streets, a different town. You can't compare it to a house that's sold across the street, what that house sold for, because that's a different municipality altogether. Different tax base, different valuations. The physical features and conditions should be similar. If not, you make adjustments to your valuation here. And terms of conditions of the comp properties that have sold, you got to know when to make adjustments. Find out, first of all, if it's an arm's length transaction or not. And if the subject property is missing a feature or is in poorer condition than the comparable, you're going to subtract from the value of the comparable to bring it to the same level. And the opposite's true. If the subject property has a feature or is in better condition than the comparable, add to the value of the comparable. I'll show you an easier way to remember that. Okay, let me turn on my camera here. Okay, so if you got one property, it's got, for example, you got one property, it's got 4 bedrooms and another has 3. If the subject property has 4 bedrooms, but a comparable property that recently sold only has 3 bedrooms, you need to find out the value of a bedroom and then add it to the sales price to make it as if we know what this property sold, the comp sold for, but we're trying to determine the value of the subject property. But the comp only had 3 bedrooms and the subject property had 4. So we have to determine what the value of a bedroom is and add it to the valuation, bringing it up to the same level to pretend that it was the same as the subject property. And that's how we determine how much the subject property should sell for. If the comparable had 5 bedrooms, we'd have to subtract the value of one of the bedrooms to bring it down to the same level. That's what they mean. Comp poorer, add to the value. Comp better, subtract from the value. So we're trying to pretend we know the comparable property is already sold. We know what they sold for. So what we got to do is determine the value for the differences and add to bring it up to the same level, or subtract. If the comp is in poor condition, just overall condition, you got to figure out a valuation for the condition of the property, just for that, what that would make in a difference in price, and then add that back in. Or if the comp was in better condition than the subject property, figure out that and then subtract that from what its overall sale price would be, so that we have a better price range to determine the value of the subject property. Okay, so you guys know when to add or subtract.
So how would you calculate that? Like the square foot of the room?
Right now, I just want you to know when to add or subtract from the value of a comparable. Okay.
Okay.
So if a comparable property is missing a feature or is in poorer condition, you figure out what the value of that would be. Don't worry about how we do that right now. You figure out what the value of that would be, and then you would add it to the comparable, or if it's in better condition or has a feature subject property doesn't have, you're going to subtract that from its value. Okay. Now, how do you know how much that value would be? Experience and taking these types of classes, like from the Ottawa group, right? That's how you would determine the values of them. Through experience and taking classes that would educate you and learn how to do it. Look, here's an example. You always have to have a minimum of 3 comparable properties when appraisers do appraisals, when real estate agents do CMAs. You got to have a minimum of 3 comparable properties to compare it to. So here's the subject property and its features here. We're only going to compare a couple of features here so that we don't make it too complicated. And then you have comparables that have sold, and these are the sale prices that they have sold for. They're all the same architectural style. That's good. So it's easier. We don't have to make an adjustment based on the different architectural styles, because some are worth more than others. Some are more demand than others. So they're all Cape Cod style houses. Okay, the subject property we're trying to come up with a list price for, a valuation for, has 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and 1 garage space. Now over here, I got a little guide where we just made up some numbers about what a bedroom is worth, what a half bath, what a garage, and what an additional garage spot is worth. So we just pull those numbers out in there just for an example. Okay, so if we have a 4-bedroom and comparable property 1 only has 3 bedrooms and 2 baths and no garage spaces. So we'd have to find out the value of a bedroom, $15,000, and we're going to add that to this comp to pretend that if it sold, if it had 4 bedrooms, what it actually would have sold for. With 3 bedrooms, it sold for 300 grand. So we're making adjustments for the differences now. The subject property has 2.5 baths. This one only had 2. So we're estimating the half bath to be $5,000 in value. So we're going to add that to try to pretend that if this house had another half bath like the subject property, what it would have sold for. We know it sold for $300,000. And it didn't have any garage whatsoever. If it did, a garage is valued at $10,000, so you're going to add $10,000 to the value. So add up all the comps. That's $30,000 adjustment. This property would have sold for $330,000 if it was exactly the same as the subject property. Right? Now the comp 2, it has 4 bedrooms like the subject. It has 2 baths and 1 garage space. So it needs a half bath. So we'll make the adjustment by adding to its value because it's missing a half bath. So it sold for $325,000. A half bath would be $5,000. So add that $5,000. It makes it $330,000 is the total adjusted value. Now we're starting to get a picture of the price range that this house should be listing for. And I mean, we already have a price range between $300,000 and $335,000, but we're trying to make a more accurate price range with these adjustments. Now, comparable property 3 has 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, just like the subject property, but it has an extra garage space. It has a 2-car garage instead of a 1. Determine how much an additional garage space is worth, $6,000. In this case, we got to subtract from the value to bring it down to the same level as the subject property. And this one sold for $335,000, subtract $6,000, and it would be a $329,000. So now we got a pretty tight price range here between $329,000 to $330,000. So basically, this house should be listing for about $330,000. That's how you come up with the valuations and making the adjustments for the differences. Yes, the hard part is how do you make the adjustments? Well, taking classes and having experience. That's how. To be able to do that. Look, if you take this class from Ottawa, they give you pricing guides. Let me see if I can pull one up and show you. So we got a CMA adjustment guide. I know I got a newer one somewhere because I went to a class, but this is an older one from 2023. you know, here's another reason why I take this class. They give you adjustment guides like this. Where if you got a house that's in the 250, 400, 750, 1.25, 2.5 million and above price range, how much of an adjustment would you make in the price if it's on a busy road? Is your house worth more or less if it's on a busy road? If it's a house, or versus commercial real estate may be worth a little bit more. Residential, no. You don't want your kids playing on a busy road, do you? So busy road, you're going to subtract. How much? Well, 2% in this price range, 3.3% in this price range. If it's within 100 feet of power lines. If it's on a cul-de-sac street, that's privacy. Or for lot size differences. We only make adjustments for, larger size lots if they're non-subdividable. So we make all kinds of adjustments like this for the different things. So learning to properly value property is a skill, and your broker may be able to train you, but how good are they at it? Taking a class from actual appraisers specifically made for teaching how to do CMAs to real estate agents is a good idea. The Realtors Association also has a pricing strategies course that you could take, but this one's a little bit more local. Why not take them both? They're both maybe a day class, couple hours, and under $100. And it's a write-off on your taxes, and it counts towards CE. So in addition to counting towards CE credits for your license renewal, it'll help you price properties more accurately and sell homes quicker. Be more skilled at that. On the following slide, I'll show you an example of older adjustment guide. Oh, I added one to the slide itself. Let's see. Yeah, okay, here's that one from 2023 that I pulled up in that other window. Oh, good. So let me close that then. Don't need the other window then. So here you could see a sample of the adjustment guide. Now take a look. This assists you in it. If it's for age, how do you make adjustments for age? There's a little formula here they give you. And what about condition and decor? If there was a adjustment for repairs or improvements, they give you formulas on how to figure that out. The difference of a half bath versus a full bath. Well, in a $250,000 price range, it would be a half bath would be 1.2% or $3,000, and 2.4% for a full bath or $6,000. But in a house that's in the $750,000 price range, it would be 1.7% or $13,000 for a half bath, or 3.2% or $24,000 difference for a full bath. So for gross living area, it's done by square foot, not by number of bedrooms. You see, there's no listing here for how many bedrooms, because appraisers, even though they mark it on their appraisal, they don't care how many bedrooms there are. They care about that doesn't play into their valuation. They make note of it, but they go by square footage. And I'll tell you the reason why. I've had a listing before for a house for sale, and the exact same house was up on the market next door. And the one that I got was a 3-bedroom house. The neighboring house was a 5-bedroom. But all they did is they split one of the large bedrooms into 2 bedrooms. Does that make the house worth more because it's got 5 bedrooms? It's the same exact square footage. As a matter of fact, my house my listing was in better condition. It was recently remodeled. Everything was high end in that house, whereas the neighbor's house with the 5 bedrooms, the place was kind of dilapidated.
it might not be of value to um it might be a value to whoever's purchasing it, but as far as the value of the home, I don't think that the value of the home goes up.
So you were talking about the demand may be there for somebody to have the extra bedrooms, but not necessarily the value.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, the 3-bedroom house that I had listed was worth more simply because of all the improvements to it. The house was stunning, from the hardwood floors that they installed to the custom cherry cabinets in the kitchen with the soft touch drawers and every kind of bell and whistle you could imagine. The bedroom, the large bedrooms, the bedrooms were significantly larger. They had their walk-in closets with his and her sides of the closet with a changing room in the closet versus the neighbors who just had more bedrooms, without all those, uh, you know, higher end features to them. So the house was definitely priced by square footage, but also the appraiser made adjustments for condition, decor, the improvements that were made. So, like we were talking about in-ground pools. I mean, how much does it cost on average to install an in-ground pool? Let's just say,
There is a barn cat out in.
let's just say, for instance, it was $50,000 to install an in-ground pool. Over here on this adjustment guide, you could see on a $250,000 house, it's going to increase the value by 3.2% or $8,000. So you're definitely not getting all the money back for that improvement. And if it was a, excuse me, if it was a $750,000 price range house, it'd be $20,000. Now in a $2.5 million house, it's worth $64,000. However, I'm sure that pool costs more, and I'm sure that pool is fancier, maybe even bigger, and maybe has additional bells and whistles like all the LED lighting and the heated pool and the jacuzzi section with the waterfall and all that too. So I'm sure it costs even more to install it. So you definitely don't get all the money back from having an in-ground pool. It definitely does make the house worth more, and could possibly make it more desirable for those who are seeking a pool, but you're definitely not getting all your money back on it. What about things like solar panels? Do solar panels make your house worth more? What do you think? Solar panels make your house worth more or not?
I think so.
Yeah? Well, it depends. And then if it does make your house worth more, how do you calculate how much more? There's a formula for it. Let's see, which they don't even discuss here on this slide. They have a different guide for that. But what makes a difference of whether your solar panels make your house worth more or not? Let me see. There's a advanced adjustment guide. I think I got to pull that out from the workshop. Let me see if I can pull it up. It's just talking about market conditions. Or did they give us a guide here? No, they gave us a guide. So they give you the guide about those additional features. Nope, that's in the advanced CMA workshop class. So you'll pull up from the advanced guide. Instructions for the reference guide. See, just the other materials that they give you when you take this class makes it worth it. All these additional materials that they give you with the adjustment guides, they show you how they grade things, how to come up with the valuations. They go over a lot of information there, but that's not what I'm looking for. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Workshop part 2. The advanced adjustment guide. Okay. So in something like this, you see I'm trying to find the information about solar panels. Here, making adjustments. How do you make an adjustment for it being in a flood zone or not? Here, see, they got these little things for you to work out and figure out. It's there we go. For the solar panels, you guys can see this, right? First of all, let's look at the note. Adjustments should be reduced or eliminated if solar panels are unsightly and reduce curb appeal, are more than 7 years old, or are leased rather than owned. And most people don't own them. Most people will do that lease thing to lower your electric bill. You don't even need to pay for them. They'll install them free, right? Those are leased ones. They do not increase the value of your home at all. They can actually detract from it if they're unsightly and ugly. Are the solar panels on the front of your house or the back of the house? Do they look like this? That's kind of ugly, right? Or do they blend more into the shingles? Or are they on the back of the house? Or have a composite look like the shingles? Then they could be worth more. But how much more? Well, it depends on how much energy they save you. So they give you a formula then to calculate it. So let me add this. Let me get a screenshot of this. I'm going to actually add this into the slideshow here. Give me 1 second to add that into the slideshow, and then we'll gotta resume the recording here. Sorry about that. So I added this additional slide. Let me just go over it again. Do solar panels increase or decrease the value of the property? Once again, it depends. Are they ugly? Do you own them? How old are they? How much energy do they generate? So until people put their money where their mouth is and actually invest and purchase the solar panels instead of leasing them, the energy is just going to cost you more if you buy them. And if you lease them, it may save you a little money on electricity, maybe, but it's not going to make your house worth more at all. All right, so cost relates to the past, price relates to the present, and value relates to the future. And we could see this here where the homeowner sees the value of their home versus how the realtor sees it versus how the appraiser sees it. Now, the only one that really matters ultimately is the appraiser's valuation, because the buyer is most likely going to be getting a home loan and to purchase this property, and they're not going to get that loan unless the appraiser says that it's worth the amount you're purchasing it for, because the bank's not going to lend more money than the collateralized property, or the property that's supposed to be used as collateral for the loan. So their valuation is the only one that really matters. Even though real estate agents do CMAs, we do that for pricing homes to get a decent listing price, and also to help buyers out when making offers on prices on homes, just to make sure they're not making a offer over the value. And sellers often see their house like this. They think they got that big mansion thing going on. They think their house is worth it. My house is better than all the others. Or just simply they want more money for their house. And they have often unrealistic expectations that we need to try to hammer out of their head to start looking in reality and living in reality, which is no small task and not very easy to do. You could create that CMA presentation for them, and they're in agreement with everything. They see, they understand, and you've explained everything, and they're still like, well, I want $1 gazillion for my house still anyway. And you're like, where are you getting these numbers from? And often you do such a great job, you put all that time and effort in, and the seller's still like, well, I think my home is worth this. This is how much I want for it. And hey, that's up to them to decide how much that they're going to ask for it, but we need to try to hammer them down into reality and educate them. Otherwise, we know that house isn't going to sell. Would you ever take an overpriced listing knowing that it's not going to sell? Would you?
Um, no, but I think it also depends because if they're not realistic on, how much the price is going to be for the home, you have to kind of educate them, like you've been telling us to educate the seller and say like, listen, like this is what the value is, for the home in your area. So I
So
think
you
that
edu-
they probably
okay,
just need like to be
so you
ex
educated them. You educated them. They're listening. They're all ears. They're paying attention to you. They're like, uh-huh, 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 uh-huh. And then they still say, but I still want that much for my house.
Oh, then nope, that's someone else's problem. Or it just won't sell.
It won't.
It
Um,
just won't sell for them.
so would you take the listing is the question. Now, for me, it would depend. It would depend on the person. Are they, do they seem like they're going to be a major pain in my ass or not? I mean, really, is this a person who's going to be blaming me for the reason their house doesn't sell? Despite their unrealistic expectations, are they going to be expecting me to advertise this property in places that are places that you don't normally advertise homes, like in the Wall Street Journal, on the front page of the Wall Street Journal? I didn't see it advertised there, and they get really ridiculous with their demands. Yeah, I would just wish them the best of luck selling it on their own. But if they seem like maybe I could hammer them down on price later on, I may take an overpriced listing. Um, or if it's not too ridiculously overpriced, because people come in and make offers. Um, or because even if they don't, I could have open houses. I could have people just calling on the listing. And even though they may not be interested in this property because it's clearly overpriced, they're looking in that price range. So I may be getting buyers for homes in that price range that may buy something else. So I could use it as a tool. I could use that overpriced listing to get me more business, knowing that this house ain't gonna sell. And you gotta be aware of that. And you gotta be informing the seller straight up. You're overpriced. You need to come down. That's why. If the house does not have any written offers within 30 days, it's only because it's overpriced. It has nothing to do with the condition. It could be a hoarder's house, you know, and you'll be able to still sell it if it's priced right. Um, Price is a major factor there. Although hoarders' houses can be difficult to sell, even if it is priced right, you still got to get somebody that's willing to clean up that mess, you know. So it's often hard to explain to people. We put all this effort and time into these CMAs, and then they just like brush it off. And they're like, "Oh, I don't care. I still want this much for it. I think my house is worth this much." Where are you coming up with these numbers? Out of thin air. Well, that's because that's how much I want. They just have unrealistic expectations, and it's kind of like banging your head against the wall sometimes. But now you got to decide: do I take the listing or do I turn it down? Well, it depends. Is the person going to be a pain in the ass? Do they have unrealistic expectations? They're going to be hounding you to spend all this money on advertising and marketing their property in places you normally don't, or they want you to do open houses every other day. You know what? Good luck in selling your house with another agent, maybe. You know, you got to examine the situation and see for yourself. Is the juice going to be worth the squeeze on this one for me? All right, so now let's learn about the cost approach based on substitution. We're going to go over the 3 approaches to value here and some vocabulary, and then we're going to get into the math of it and do some math problems. So right now we're just going over each one of the different approaches to value. So the cost approach is based on substitution, also known as an appraisal by summation. Summation means you're doing some math, you're adding some things up here. So what is an appraisal by summation, or the cost approach? Well, it's for determining the value of special purpose, unique, or one-of-a-kind properties or public buildings that may not have comparables or generate income in the normal fashion, like a school, church, library, city hall. How do you value city hall? You may think it's a ridiculous question. When does city hall go up for sale? Well, a couple of years back, the one in Rahway did. So how do you value it? You're going to use the cost approach, also known as the appraisal by summation. Or it could be used for determining the value of a custom, unique home. This approach is most often used by appraisers, not by salespeople, due to the knowledge that's required. However, on exams, we still get questions about it, so pay attention. So what is the process of valuing a property using the appraisal by summation cost approach? Well, the first step is they estimate the value of the land without any improvements on it at its highest and best use. What is the highest and best use? A use that's most in demand in the reasonably near future, or the most valuable use that can be applied to the property right now. So it's an estimate, and then you estimate the current cost to construct all the site improvements on the property using either the replacement or reproduction cost approaches. Well, what is that? Well, let's first do the highlights here, get these highlights done, and then we'll go over that. You guys got those things down yet, or still highlighting it?
One more second.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
No problem. So these are all 5 of the steps, but we're gonna go over these terms and the steps individually, and then we'll wrap it up and we'll do a recap. Okay. So first step is they estimate the value of the land without the improvements to it. What is the real estate? What is the land worth put to its highest and best use. That's the most valuable use that it could be used for, or the use that's most in demand in the reasonably near future. Then they estimate the cost to do all the construction and the site improvements of that building, using either the replacement or reproduction cost approach. Well, what is that? Well, here we go. We got to know these terms. They are an exam. Here you can highlight them on page 312. Reproduction cost is the cost to build an exact duplicate of the subject building at today's current prices. So you would actually want that kind of an insurance policy on your house too. When you get insurance, do you have a reproduction or a replacement cost policy? If you have all high-end custom stuff in your house, you may want the reproduction cost. It's a little bit more expensive insurance, but it'll replace everything exactly the way that it is with those high-end appliances and all that. A replacement cost will just, like if you have a fire in your kitchen, it's just going to replace it with something that serves the same purpose, but doesn't necessarily isn't exactly the same. It's not any custom cabinetry or countertops or appliances, but it'll just be like standard linoleum, countertops instead of the granite or other custom material, because it serves the same purpose to prepare your food on the counter. So that's what replacement cost is. It'll replace it with something that's functional, but does not necessarily, it's not necessarily an exact duplicate. So the appraiser would have to determine which one of these approaches they're going to use in their valuation. Now, here's an interesting little factoid for you. Just has nothing to do with exams, but if you ever like have a fire or something, or you got to do an insurance claim on your house, insurance companies use the same methods, the reproduction or replacement costs. Now, they usually send out their own insurance adjuster that works for them to determine the value of any claims to pay them out. And because that adjuster works for the insurance company, they're going to want that to be as minimal as possible. So you can always hire your own private public adjuster that would work for you. And they're licensed. So you'll probably be able to get more out of your insurance company with a claim from your own private adjuster. They call them public adjusters. A lot of people are not aware of that. Like, for instance, everybody got these highlights down, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, so let me give you a for instance. Let's just say on the kitchen, you got some kind of tile floors, like some kind of stone tile or whatever. And your husband drops his bowling ball on the floor and cracks a tile in the middle of the kitchen. Okay? You get the insurance adjusters at your house for something else. You may see that crack in the tile and say, your tile's cracked over there. You want to file a claim with your insurance company for that? Now, you may be thinking, what, for one tile that's broken? But your insurance adjuster thinks a little differently. They may be like, well, no. I mean, you can't just replace the one tile. And if you do, it's not going to match the rest of the tiles, because tiles are made in lot numbers. If you actually go to a store and you look at a box of tile, there's lot numbers on there, because you want to get the tiles that were made in that same lot. Otherwise, they may not match. So now we need to get tiles to retile the whole kitchen so that it matches. So you see how they try to get more money out of the insurance company by having these rationales and these types of explanations, and they're licensed to do it. So the insurance company can try arguing it, but if it's based on a solid principle like that, they can end up getting a lot more money out of your insurance company. And then after that, it's up to you whether you want to replace the one tile or, just keep the money, but that's what a public adjuster does. They help you get more money for these damages that may have been done in your house that the insurance company wouldn't otherwise approve or try to minimize the amount that they give you. Okay, so the cost approach, you got to figure out if you're going to use the reproduction cost approach or the replacement cost approach when determining the value. So once again, recap. First step, they estimate the land value put to its highest and best use. Then they estimate the cost to construct the buildings and all the improvements, running the lines for the gas, sewer, electric to the house, doing the improvements of constructing the building using either the cost, using the replacement or reproduction cost approach, which you need to know the difference of for exams. And then they have to estimate the accrued amount of depreciation to the improvements. Yes, yeah, you determine depreciation of an improvement, not to the land itself, because as a general rule, land does not depreciate. Only the improvements to the land do, because, the house gets old, it gets termites, things of that nature, but the land doesn't depreciate. Not unless there's an extreme circumstances like chemical contamination or something like that. So, what is depreciation? It's a loss of value to an improvement due to any cause or condition. And as a general rule, land does not depreciate. There is curable and incurable forms of depreciation. There's physical deterioration. Well, this could be cured with repairs. Then you have functional obsolescence. Okay. What does that mean? Don't look at your books. Let's just examine these terms. So I'm going to show you how you can remember them and determine what they mean just by looking at them. If something is functional, what does that mean? We're looking at this term, functional obsolescence. If something's functional, what does that mean?
Something that works.
It works. It's functional. If something is obsolete, the root word of obsolescence comes from obsolete. If something's obsolete, what does that mean? It's old and outdated, right? But it still works. It's functional, but it's outdated by today's standards. Let me give you an example when it comes to real estate, something that's functionally obsolete. A 5-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. Now, that one bathroom that's in that house could have recently been remodeled and is gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's big, but it's still just one bathroom with 5 bedrooms. You're going to have a lot of people fighting over that bathroom, right? So by today's standards, people get condos with 2 bedrooms and they want 2.5 baths, right? So by today's standards, that 5-bedroom, 1-bath house is functionally obsolete, suffers from functional obsolescence. But is it curable? Sure, you could add another bathroom, right? Now, what about external obsolescence? When something is external, that means it's outside, right? Something outside your property, not on your property. Something in the area. External obsolescence is also known as economic or locational obsolescence. And often these are incurable because you have little to no control over what happens on someone else's property. Maybe the neighboring property is a park and it's contaminated with PCBs or something, right? Not much you could do about that. It's on someone else's property. So external obsolescence is almost always incurable. So Items, external obsolescence are items not on the subject property. They're external to the site. However, they do have an effect on the property's value or desirability, like the local economy, right? This type of obsolescence is almost always incurable because you have no control over those factors on someone else's property or the local economy. So those are your explanations and definitions for functional and external obsolescence, so that you guys have an understanding how that works, what those things mean, and what depreciation is. It's a loss of value to an improvement value due to any cause or condition. So when you're calculating depreciation, you got to subtract the value of the land from that first. You only calculate the depreciation on the value of the improvement, not the land. Why not? Because land does not depreciate, except in extreme circumstances. Okay. Anybody want to snap a picture of that slide? Gives you a little better, easier definition than what the book has that you're about to highlight. So here's what you'll highlight in the book. For depreciation, physical deterioration, and functional obsolescence and external obsolescence. Let me know when you got those highlights down, please. Let me know when you guys are done. Have the highlights. You guys still highlighting?
I got it.
Right. So the cost approach, once again, you estimate the value of the land without the improvements at its highest and best use. You got to know what the term highest and best use is. You'll get that on exam. Then you estimate the cost to construct the site improvements using replacement or reproduction cost approaches. Now, you'll need to know for exams what replacement and reproduction cost means. Then you have to estimate the accrued depreciation. So you need to know what depreciation is for exams. It's a loss of value due to an improvement due to any cause or condition. And there's two types of depreciation that we'll focus on that we need to know for exams. The external obsolescence and functional obsolescence. Then you deduct the accrued depreciation from the estimated cost of the new building. Noting that you need to remember also that land does not depreciate. And then you add back in the estimated value of the depreciated building to the land's value. Remember, you can't depreciate land because land does not depreciate, except in extreme circumstances, like if it was contaminated. Okay. So here we could highlight the income approach. Write down this formula on the side in the margin of the page there. This is your T formula that's used to determine cap rates. And in order to calculate a cap rate, you'll need to know the GOI, that's the gross operating income, the gross operating expenses to figure out the net operating income. And when you guys have all those highlights and those notes there and the formula written there, and here's the instructions on how to use that T formula. TGIF, top number goes in the calculator first.
Got it.
Okay. So the income approach is used to determine a value of any income generating property. And this can be done in several different ways. One of the most common ways is by determining cap rates, or cap is short for capitalization rate. And that's the estimate of the rate of return of an investor's money. So how much money they invest into this property? What's the rate of return for them to get that money back? The higher the rate, the more income they'll get. But the higher the cap rate, if you get over certain numbers, you got to realize, how are they making that much money? Is it because of it being well overpriced for the rents? Or are they just not putting any money back into the property and they're allowing it to get dilapidated? That's the thing you need to consider if those cap rates get kind of high, there's realistic cap rates, and then there's ones that are kind of like pie in the sky numbers. And if they're really high, it may seem like there's a issue there. All right, so come on, next slide. So I put together a couple updates. You guys are the first class to see these updates that I've added to the slideshow here on calculating rates of return integrated into the slides now. So to calculate how many years of investment it'll take to pay itself off at a certain cap rate, you basically use this formula. 1 divided by the cap rate equals the payback period. So if you have a cap rate of only 4%, it's going to take you 25 years to recover your purchase price. If you got a cap rate of 6%, it'll take 16.67 years. And at 8%, it'll take you 12 and a half years to recoup all your money to buy that property. So 8% cap rate's actually pretty good. So if you guys want to take note of this formula, you're not going to find it in the book. So
if you buy an investment property though, and you're not paying all cash, this doesn't work because this says it assumes an all cash purchase.
Well, because when you're getting a loan, you got to factor in loan costs as well. So
Right.
this would,
No, I understand that, but
Yeah.
so this formula can't be you can't use this if you have a mortgage.
well, we use this formula when selling property, or
Okay.
when you're purchasing property, it'll give you an idea of how long it'll take to recover your money for your investment. Granted, if you're using a loan, it's going to take a little bit longer, but
Right.
But this way you could get an idea of, how much, what the payback rate is, of this property. Is it a good investment? And so by figuring out the numbers this way, it'll be the same for everybody because you're not factoring in different mortgage rates and different prices that someone else paid for the property. This is a good way just to figure out if the property is a good investment or not.
Sure.
And how good of an investment, So the income approach to value is based on the present worth of future rights to income used for valuing of a property that generates income, like apartment buildings, office buildings, shopping centers, multifamily houses, using 2 common approaches, either cap rates or the gross rent multiplier, GRM. So a cap rate, short for capitalization rate, and it's a measurement that determines the rate of return of an investor's money. Using the GRM, that's the gross rent multiplier, this compares 2 income-producing properties to determine the value when all the financial information isn't available for us. It's a way that we can make an educated guesstimate, okay, to come up with a price range using the info from the property that we have available, or maybe for an info for a different property that we have. We come up with the multiplier for that property, and then we apply it to a similar property. For instance, you have to use the gross rent multiplier. you have to compare apples to apples here. You have to compare a 3-unit building to another 3-unit building. You cannot compare a 3-unit building to a 4-unit building, okay? When using the gross rent multiplier, it just won't work. They have to be similar income producing properties. 3-bedroom, or I'm sorry, 3-unit to a 3-unit, a 2-unit to a 2-unit, and it'll work. So if you don't have all the information to calculate cap rates, for example, on a property, which you'll need the income, the expenses, but if you don't have those figures available for the particular property we're trying to value, but you do for another similar property in the area, you could calculate what the gross rent multiplier is on that property, apply it to the other property, and it'll get you in the ballpark when you're figuring out numbers. And then we have something called the gross income multiplier, but you're probably not going to get that one on exams, or in real life for that matter. Usually we use cap rates anyway, but I'll show you how you could use the GRM. But the gross income multiplier is basically taking the GRM plus also factoring in income from other non-real estate income producing sources, like a concession stand that may be selling food or t-shirts or something. So you use these formulas, the cap rates, to figure out the T formula is used to figure out the cap rate. And you'll need to have remember the T formula, small numbers always on top, the large numbers on one side, and a percentage or rate on the other side. In this case, the small number is the annual net operating income, the NOI. And the large number is the property's value. And the other number is the percentage or cap rate. Now, the gross rent multiplier, it also uses a type of T formula. I call it the reverse T formula, because instead of the large number going on the bottom, that property value, it goes up top, reverse of what the normal is. And the small number goes on the bottom. And in this case, the small number is not the net annual income, but it's the gross monthly income. And then you have the multiplier, which is not a percent. It's a whole number. Now, a multiplier, is there a good GRM or a bad GRM? No. It's pretty much an insignificant number. It's just a number that's applied to a property, and then you could use it to compare it to another property. The number itself, there's no such thing as a good GRM or bad GRM. It's just a number a whole number used to compare two things. And I'll show you how that works. But these are the two formulas you need to know. And remember, compare a 3-unit building to another 3-unit building. You can't compare a 3-unit to a 4-unit. You got to compare apples to apples here, so to speak. Okay. All right, so income approach to value is based on the present worth of future rights to income, used for valuation of any property that generates income, once again. And we're going to use either cap rates or the GRM. And so we also have that GIM, but we're going to use the GRM. Okay, so cap rates, capitalization rates, is a measurement that determines the rate of return on an investor's money using the T formula. In order to calculate it, you'll need to have any two of the three numbers: the annual net operating income, the value, or the cap rate. Now, if on an exam question they give you the monthly net operating income, can you still figure this out? Sure. You just times it by 12 months in a year. You'll get the annual figure, right? So it's easy as that. So you'll need the gross operating income, the GOI. That's the annual income before expenses. And you'll need to know what the annual expenses are, the gross operating expenses. If they just give you the monthly or quarterly or, because some property expenses are charged monthly, some are charged quarterly, like taxes or sewer bill or monthly bills like the gas or the electric. You multiply them. And then you subtract the expenses from the income to get the nets. So GOI minus GOE is NOI. So income minus expenses equals the net, basically. Don't get confused by why do they call it gross operating, net operating? That's what they call it, okay? So you guys know income minus expenses equals your net, how much you put in your pocket, how much you could use, right? It's basically the formula there. And then we're going to learn about the GRM and how to do that on the coming slides. So the GRM is the gross rent multiplier used to determine value by comparing two or more similar income generating properties. Once again, you can't compare a 4-unit building to a 5-unit building. You got to compare a 4-unit to a 4-unit or a 5-unit to a 5-unit. Using a whole number, not a percentage, which is called a multiplier, which is an insignificant number in itself. There's no such thing as a good or a bad multiplier. It's just a number used to compare two similar income producing properties when you have info about for one, but not for both. So it uses the reverse T formula where you'll need to have the gross monthly income and the value to figure out the GRM. And once again, the GIM, you would also add in any additional income from non-real estate stuff like concession stands. But we're not going to do a problem on that. We're just going to do the GRM and the cap rate math. So you can write that formula down here in the book. Highlight gross rent multiplier relates to the sales price of a property to its rental income. And underline similar properties and put an arrow down here, give a little explanation for yourself. 3-unit to a 3-unit, 4-unit to a 4-unit. You could only compare similar properties in that regard. And here's the reverse T formula. The reverse T formula only works for the gross rent multiplier. It's not like that cap rate uses the T formula, which could be used for calculating your commission rates and a lot of other stuff. In addition, that reverse T formula is pretty good. Let me know when you got all this written down. You know, when you guys are done highlighting it and writing the notes.
I'm good.
Right? Anybody need more time or everybody good?
I'm good.
Okay, go. So once again, these are the T formula and the reverse T formula and the info that you need to calculate them. So we'll actually do some math problems. I first want to go over just the instructions and the notes and the words and terminology. Then we'll go back and we'll do the math, okay? So how does an appraiser, reconciliation, here's another term you got to add to your definition list here. Now, how does an appraiser determine which of the three approaches to value is the best to use? Well, an appraiser would try to calculate it using all three approaches and then use the most profitable one. So there's the sales comparison approach, the cost approach, and the income approach. And reconciliation is when you apply more than one of the three approaches to value on the same property. It's called reconciliation. That in itself is an exam question, hint, hint. So let's highlight it. If more than one of the three approaches to value are applied to the same property, that's reconciliation. Page 316. So the cap rates versus GRM. A cap rate, the percentage return based on the net operating income divided by the property's market value. It accounts for expenses, vacancies, and operations. It measures the true income performance. It uses the net operating income, so it includes expenses and vacancy. It helps determine whether income justifies the price and the risk. It's used in professional appraisals as part of the income approach to value. And the GRM, the gross rent multiplier, it's a simple ratio comparing property price to the annual gross rent. It ignores all the expenses. It estimates how many years of gross rent it would take to equal the purchase price. However, when using it to compare two properties, you could use the gross monthly income. So here's a fast screening tool for you, the GRM. Okay, uses the gross rent. Lower GRM equals potentially better deal. Good for comparing similar properties quickly. Does not consider expenses, vacancies, or management costs. And it often is used by brokers because the gross rent is easy to verify. So the cap rate, the percentage return, is based on net operating income divided by the property's market value. It accounts for expenses, vacancies, and operations. I'll show you how to figure that out. We'll do some math problems in a little while. And the GRM, the gross rent multiplier, is a simple ratio comparing the property price to the annual gross rent, ignoring all the expenses. It estimates how many years of gross rent it would take to equal the purchase price, or to compare two properties using the gross monthly rents. It must use similar properties, 2-unit to a 2-unit, a 3-unit to a 3-unit, for that to work. But it's a quick, rough, dirty tool, not as accurate as cap rates, but it'll get you in the ballpark. Okay. And the formulas are right here for figuring out the cap rate. It's NOI divided by the market value. To figure out the GRM, you take the price divided by the gross annual rent or gross monthly rent. There you go. That's the T formula. It could be used for figuring out a lot of different math problems, if you recall. Here's 5 different things that you could figure out using this T formula on the left. Just by, like, you could match it up. Like if you want to figure out the net income annual, you're going to, number 3, you're going to need all the things from number 3 here. The market value and the cap rate will tell you the net, or you can take the net income and the market value to figure out the cap rate. You divide down, multiply across, and TGIF, top number goes in the calculator first when figuring these things out. So here's some math for us. Here's a problem here. You got the formula here on the left-hand side. On the right in this box is the question. If you're charged, if you charge a seller 6% commission and the total commission collected was $21,600, how much did the property sell for? I already plugged the numbers in the T formula for you. See how the T formula can be helpful instead of just plugging numbers in there, trying to see if they match the multiple choice. You draw the T formula, the small number goes up top. Small number is the commission in relation to the property value. So the large number, the property value goes on one side. And we know the percentage because it's showing right here. So you divide down or multiply across. In this case, we got to divide down. And when you do that, TGIF, the top number goes in the calculator first. So 21,600 divided by 6% is what? You guys have your calculators handy? You got one in your cell phones, right? 21,600 divided by 6%. What do you get?
360. 360.
There you go, 360. Doesn't that T formula make it a lot easier to figure out? You're not guessing at, am I multiplying, am I dividing? You know, you just draw the T formula and say, hey, small number goes up top, large number on one side, and the rate on the other. And you could figure out the missing component. Now let's give another question using the same problem. If the house sold for $360,000 and the agent charged 6% commission, how much would the total commission be? Well, plug them into the T formula, the large number and the rate. Well, you multiply across to figure out that one. And that's pretty easy to figure out your commission. And you get?
21.6.
There you go. Cap rates, the income approach to value measures the rate of return of an investor's money. So the question is, if a property sells for $400,000 with 3 units that rent for $1,200 a month each, with the following expenses, what would the cap rate be? Okay, anytime you get a question like this, I highly suggest you first add up what all the expenses are and turn them all into annual expenses first, and then you can just add them up. It makes it a lot easier. Instead of having one that's an annual expense, one that's a quarterly expense, one that's a monthly, just convert them all to annual and then add them up. And remember that you don't use the mortgage payment when calculating cap rates, because that would be different for everybody. So add up all the expenses except for the mortgage loan financing amount. So I already did all that for you guys. All right. So here you got in the brackets. I already added them all up. Now I got the annual. Here are the annual figures. Okay. You get the GOI, the expenses, and then you get the net. And then you plug that in up top, right? So the annual income is $43,200. So we got, how did I figure that out? We got 3 units that rent for $1,200 a month each. So 3 times 1,200, that'll give you your monthly figure. Then you times that by 12, and it gives you the annual income of $43,200. But that's the gross income. Now we add up all of our annual expenses and we get $16,560. Subtract your income, your expenses from your income, and you get the net of $26,640. Now what do we do? How do we figure out the cap rate? What do we got to do here? Figure out the cap rate.
The small number goes on top, so the 26,640.
Uh-huh.
And then the price of the property is 400.
Yep.
And so then you divide the 26 by the 400.
Yep.
Divide down, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So the top number goes in the calculator first, TGIF, top number goes in the calculator first. Divided by 400,000, and you get a cap rate of
6%.
6.6% to be exact.
Oh yeah, 6.66. Yeah.
Okay.
Not 6.66. Yes.
Yep. All right. Now, the trick here is you need to know not to use the financing and mortgaging payment, right? Because that's a number they gave you as an expense. So you'd get a different number if you factored in that. All right, let's get another problem going here. So calculating the GRM using that same example from the previous slide that has a value of $400,000 and a gross monthly income of $3,600 and the cap rate of 6.6%. What is the GRM for that property? So you got all the figures up here. What numbers do we need to figure out the gross rent multiplier? The value of the property, that goes up top, right? Just look at, I got the example here, the gross monthly on the other side. Divide down, and you get a GRM of
111.11. Oh.
yes,
Yeah.
111.11. Now that's just a number now. We know that a 3-unit building in this area with a 6.6% cap rate has a GRM of 111.11. So now we could use that GRM to other properties compared to other properties in the neighborhood. So before we do that, let's look up another way to calculate GRM. If the property's for sale at $425,000 with $9,500 a year in taxes and $900 a year insurance and annual rents of $28,000 a year, and the property expenses are $12,500 a year. What is the GRM for this property? Well, let me ask you a question. You got to always ask yourself a question about the question. And the question is that you're going to be asking yourself, what numbers do I need to figure out the GRM? You guys remember? The value of the property and the gross monthly income. So do you need to know any of these expenses? All these other numbers that they added into the question? No, it's extra info. So if you don't know what info is needed to calculate the GRM, you're just going to be tapping away trying to figure it out using all the numbers that they gave you in the exam question. When all you really need is the value of the property and the gross monthly income. Here they give you the annual income. Wait, where is it? Here, the annual income. So to figure that out, you just divide that by 12. They're being a little tricky there.
On your on that other slide though, it says the GRM equals the price divided by the gross annual rent. Is it annual or monthly?
No, gross monthly. Where do I
Oh,
have
because
that?
this
Yeah.
slide says gross annual,
So,
where it
so
says
here,
cap GR. No, back. The slide says cap and GRM to calculate rate of return, and then
are
it
you
says
talking?
formulas.
Oh, that's like you're going way back then, huh?
Yeah, sorry, that's what I was looking at. It just you see gross annual rent, so that's not right on the bottom.
Annual gross rent. Uh,
No, all the way on the bottom where it says formulas.
yeah.
It says GRM equals
GRM
price.
price equals gross annual rent divided by gross annual rent. Well, it can be figured out. It could be figured out two different ways, but use the gross monthly rent.
Use
Use the
monthly.
gross monthly. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Here, let me go to that slide and try to change that thing. Find it. There you go. Yeah, so you're going to use the gross monthly rent when you're comparing two properties. If you're doing it to find out the value, you could use the gross monthly or the gross annual, but gross monthly, keep it consistent. So you take the 28,000 annual rent, divide it by 12 months, and you get the monthly. And where does that go?
On the top.
The top gets the value of the property. Large number goes on top, the opposite of the regular T formula for figuring out GRM. The monthly, the smaller
Yeah.
number goes on the bottom. Yeah. And then the GRM for this property would be 182.17. So if a property sells for 425,000 with 4 units, here, actually, we got a question here for the cap rates. Question is, let me do some highlights here on this slide, actually. Okay. So if a property sells for, an investor says he'll purchase a property if he gets an 8% return on his investment. Will he get it? And what is the actual cap rate? If the property sells for $425,000 with 4 units with incomes of, well, we got 2 3-bedroom units renting for $1,500 a month each. Okay, obviously this is before property values got extremely inflated because these days, good luck getting a 3-bedroom for $1,500 a month, right? And 2 2-bedrooms renting for $1,200 a month each. Yeah, these numbers really got inflated over the last couple of years. So we're not going to get into the reasons as to why right now. We're just going to talk about the using these figures to figure out the cap rate. So, and here's all the property's expenses. So we already figured out and did the math, and we figured out 3,000 plus the 2,400, that's 5,400, times that by 12, and you get the gross operating income of 64,800. And then we added up all the expenses, the annual expenses, and it came out to 23,520. So we got the annual figures here of your gross operating income minus your gross operating expenses equals your net of 41,280. Now we plug in the $425,000. Excuse me. And the net goes up top. Net annual income goes up top. And you get a cap rate of, drum roll, please. That's an excellent cap rate, capitalization rate. It's the rate of return of an investor's money. 9.7, pretty good. Pretty good for any kind of investment to get a 9.7% return on your investment, right? What are your banks paying you these days? All right. So how do we calculate the GRM on this property? Well, draw a T formula again, put the value up top this time and the small number on the bottom, which is the gross monthly rent. 425 divided by 5,400, and you get a GRM of 78.7. So we're going to go to the next slide. We're going to actually use that number. So using the reverse T formula and the GRM to figure out how much to offer on the property to get around the same approximate return as the property on the previous slide without knowing all the exact figures for this property. So the GRM is a rough tool to compare another income producing property that you don't have all the figures for by using an educated guesstimate to get you in the ballpark. Because if we got 2 properties in the same neighborhood that are two 4-unit buildings that are in the same neighborhood, the expenses should be approximately the same to keep up on them. And the incomes should be approximately the same as well. Right? So we could agree that in the same neighborhood, one 4-unit building should have the same approximate expenses as another. And that the rents in that same neighborhood for a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom should be approximately in the same ballpark, right? Remember, this is a guesstimate using educated guesses. It's not meant to be 100% accurate tool, okay? but it'll help us figure out guesstimates when figuring out if this is a property that we should even show to our investor purchaser, who's only looking to buy a property if he gets a certain return on the investment. So on that other property, we've seen what gets you a 9.7% cap rate. We calculated the GRM for that property, and so for this 4-unit building now that comes up for sale in this neighborhood that has 3 3-bedroom units and 1 2-bedroom unit, so it's still a 4-unit building, so we can compare it to the other one, even though this one, that previous building had 2 3-bedrooms and 2 2-bedrooms. This one has 3 3-bedrooms and 1 2-bedroom. So we're going to use those going market rents at the time used in this example of a 3-bedroom renting for $1,500 times 3, that's $4,500, and 1 2-bedroom unit at $1,200. We add them up and we get the gross operating monthly income of $5,700 a month. So we plug that into our T formula. We plug in our cap rate to see how much we should offer to get us in that same ballpark of a 9.7% rate of return on our investment, regardless of what their asking price is. This is how we come up with our offer price. Now, on that other property, if you wanted to calculate, what the offer price would be with a different cap rate, well, you could figure out the cap rate on it and then do the GRM at a different cap rate, okay, to figure out what the offer price would be. But this is for 9.7% cap rate guesstimate. So you take the gross monthly income of $5,700, times it by the GRM, and we should keep our offer price at around $448,590 to get us in that same 9.7% cap rate. If you offer more money than that, well, the cap rate starts coming down, that rate of return on your investment, right? So the value below is the maximum offer price to get us in the same 9.7% cap rate range as the property on the previous slide in the same neighborhood. You see how this could be a useful tool for you when you don't have any of the figures and we're just guesstimating based on the rents? We didn't even know what the rents were here. We just guessed on what the average going rent is in that area for a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom.
What is the cap rate on what would be considered a good investment cap rate?
That all depends on you as the investor, but 6% is a great return on investment,
Yeah, I just calculated that on the building that we own and it came out to 6%. So that's good.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's good. That's good. Now, in some other, listen, that's good in New Jersey. If you invest in, some other places, you may be able to get a much higher return on your investment because simply the expenses like the property taxes will be much lower.
Right.
New Jersey is one of the highest tax states in the nation. So, for New Jersey, that's pretty good.
6%. Okay.
You invest maybe in upstate New York, in a rural areas, not the city, or in Pennsylvania, even though Pennsylvania's prices have been ticking up as well, has to deal with the politics, right? Political decisions that your local leaders make is what contributes to your property taxes more than on the national level. Then the president has no say in what your local property taxes are. That's your state and local. The local has more of a say. So anytime your city council, your council members, they vote to do improvements in the town or spend money on this or that, well, that all goes into your budget that now they need to get that much money for their taxes. So taxes contribute to that. And then if you're an investor, it affects your bottom line here too. But every homeowner is really an investor if you think about it, because when they sell, they just hold on to their investment much longer. And when they eventually sell it, hopefully the property values have increased. And generally speaking, they do for real estate. It's usually a safe investment over the long term. Short term, well, real estate markets fluctuate. They go up, they go down. But in the long term, generally, they're good, safe investments. Okay, so everybody that wanted it got a snapshot of this slide showing them how to do this? And the previous slide?
Wait a minute, hold on one sec. Okay.
All righty. You got it? Are you good? You're still opening your app there. Okay. You good now?
I'm good, yes.
Okay. So now we'll learn about the cost approach. Well, actually, it's lunchtime, so I guess we'll learn about it after lunch. So let me pause. All right. So the cost approach, using calculating appreciation or depreciation, works like this. First step is you're going to determine which method to use, whether it's going to be the straight line or the compounding method. Now, the question itself will tell you to use the straight line or compounding method. If it doesn't tell you, then you're going to use the straight line method. Now, the straight line method assumes that each year's rate of appreciation or depreciation is a percentage of the original value. So to solve you're going to multiply the annual percentage by the number of years. That's the straight line method. Now, the compound method is more accurate, but it requires repeating the math step once for each year. So you're going to do a math problem once for each year instead of just multiplying it by the number of years. And the step 2 is, are you trying to determine appreciation or depreciation? So when we're determining value, we're determining all of it. Value means 100%. So you're either going to subtract from 100%, or you're going to, if it's depreciation, or you're going to add to 100% if it's appreciation. And then you got to figure out, is the question asking you to determine a past value or a current or future value? If it's trying to determine a value in the past, you're going to divide. And if it's trying to determine a current or future value, you're going to multiply. So I'll show you now how we do this in the coming slides. But this is the basics of it, okay? Determine if it's straight line or compound, if you're going to be adding or subtracting from 100%, and then if you're trying to figure out a past value or a current value. Okay, so then you divide to figure out a past value, multiply to figure out a current or future value. So this is how that would be put into play. Here's a problem for you. It says, if you purchased a property 3 years ago and it depreciated in value, 2% per year, and today's value is $400,000. How much did you purchase the property for? So is it trying to ask you to figure out a past value or a current or future value?
Present value.
Well, it shows you what today's value is. So you're trying to figure out a past value, how much you purchased it for.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't see that. Okay. Never mind.
So then, because you're trying to figure out a past value, we're going to divide. So first step is values based on 100%. So we're going to determine if it's going to use the straight line method. And the problem here, it doesn't say. So because it doesn't say, you would use the straight line method. So you take the rate of depreciation, 2% per year, and multiply it by the number of years, 3 years, to get 6%. Now, the problem says it depreciated. So because it depreciated, we're going to subtract that 6% from 100%. Okay? So now we got 94%, right? So to do this straight line method problem, we're going to take today's value and divide it by 94% or 0.94 to get the purchase price. It should be larger. If the number is smaller, you know this is wrong because it said you bought the question says the property was purchased 3 years ago and depreciated in value 2% per year since then. So you had to have purchased it for more than 400,000. So if the number was smaller, you did it wrong. You probably multiplied. Okay. But if it's larger, that's correct. And that's how we come up with it. So straight line method is pretty simple, right? But compounding method, it's not that much more difficult. Compounding method, there's a little bit more math involved, a couple more steps. So instead of just doing one math problem like this straight up to get the answer, you would do it this way. You take 100% and subtract because it depreciated. So you put a minus sign. And from the rate of depreciation, which is 2%, that gives you 98%. And now you would do the math problem just like this once for each year. You follow? So you got to compound the rate for each year. So the first year, 400,000, we're still trying to figure out a value in the past. Oops, sorry. We're still trying to figure out a value in the past. So you would divide by 0.98, and you do that once for each year. And since it was 3 years, that's the first year. Now you take this amount, divide it by 0.98. Then you take this amount, divide it by 0.98 again, or 98%, and that would be the answer. 424,993 in compounding. Okay. So if anybody wants to take a picture to see how this is done and how it was broken down, or just watch this video segment again to get that, how we calculated this. But we'll do a couple more. Here's another question. If you purchased a property 3 years ago and it depreciated in value 2% per year, and today's value is $380,000, how much did you purchase the property for? Well, using the compound method, what do we do first? Walk me through it. Because, the math is easy. I just want you guys to remember the steps. You're allowed to use a calculator, so I'm not worried about you guys being able to figure it out. I just want you to know the steps, though. So walk me through these steps here, if you would.
So 100% minus 2%.
Correct. And then what do we do?
380 divided by 98%.
And we divided why?
Because it's the past.
Correct. So 380. We do it once for each year because it's compounding. Then you take that answer and divide it by 0.98 again. Take that answer, divide it by 0.98 again. And you purchase that property for $403,743. Now, if I told you to do the straight line method, oh, this is a little bit different. This isn't straight line. This is saying if you purchase, this is a different problem. This one's saying if you purchased the property 3 years ago for $380 and it depreciated 2% per year using the compound method, what's it worth today? How do we figure this one out? Well, you always start with 100%, right? And it's still depreciated 2% per year. So you can start off with that 100 minus 2%. You get that 0.98, right? Or 98%. And now what do you do? Not everybody all at once now.
Do you multiply?
And why are you multiplying? You're right, but why?
To determine the future and present value
Correct.
of the property?
Correct. I'm not giving you trick questions. I want to make sure that you guys are knowing why you're doing what you're doing. Yeah, correct. So what do we do now to figure out this answer? We're going to take 380 and multiply it by 0.98 this time. So this is showing you what you purchased it for, saying that it depreciated 2% per year. So this number should be coming down if we're doing it right. And it looks like it is. So we know we're on the right track. That's another way just to check your math to make sure it's working, right? If that number, they told you how much you bought it for and it depreciated, then the number should be coming down. And then you do it another time. And then the answer is 357,653. Okay. See how knowing when to divide and when to multiply makes a difference? So if you guys want to snap a picture of that, these two problems before we move on so that you could have it for your notes. And then we have, oh, that's it for that. Okay, so that's probably like one of the harder math problems that you would get because you'd need to remember those steps.
Could you go back to that other slide? I had to take a phone call, so I missed that whole thing. All right, hold on. I'm just gonna take a copy. Okay, I got it. Thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, so appraising is conducted by skilled licensed professionals called appraisers, and appraisers must be licensed. Appraisers charge fees for appraising. Several license types. We got 4 appraiser license types. You guys recall they are apprentice trainee, residential appraiser, certified residential appraiser, and then certified general appraiser. And then CMA or BPOs, these are valuations that we as real estate professionals do. It's an estimate of value by real estate licensees that must never be called an appraisal or considered as such. We need to also add a remark to every CMA and BPO that we make that says something to that effect, that this is not an appraisal, should not be considered the equivalent of one done by a licensed or certified appraiser. So why do we get appraisals done? Well, here's a list of a bunch of reasons on page 317. Write this here on the side so that you got that. Reasons for appraisal. For estate purposes, to establish taxable value or facilitate fair division among heirs. For divorce proceedings where real estate forms part of the property to be shared. For financing, when the amount to be loaned depends on the value of the property. For taxation, to furnish documentation for taxpayers' protest of the assigned assessment figures. For relocation, to establish the amount that's to be guaranteed to a transferred employee, where the relocation company then will purchase the property and then sell it. So the homeowner doesn't have to worry about it. For condemnation, to arrive at a fair compensation for the property, it's going to be taken by the government using their powers of eminent domain. For insurance, to estimate possible replacement expenses in case of loss. For damage and loss, to support income tax deductions. Or for feasibility, to study possible consequences of a particular use of a property. Now, a fee appraiser works as an independent contractor who offers services to a number of different clients. A staff appraiser is an in-house employee of organizations like the FHA or lending institutions or a large corporation. New Jersey now requires that appraisers be either licensed or certified by the state, and has for quite some time. Now, if an appraiser is doing an appraisal of a property where the buyer's purchasing using an FHA loan, they need to take a class and get FHA certified. It's like a designation that they'll put on their license that they could now do FHA loan appraisals, because they have to look out for certain things and make remarks of certain things in addition to what they normally put in an appraisal form. Okay, so what's the process that an appraiser thinks through? Well, to do an appraisal, they first have to state what the problem is they're trying to solve. They list the data needed and all the sources that they need access to. Then they gather, record, and verify the necessary data, determine the highest and best use, estimate the land value, estimate the value by each of the three approaches, reconcile that estimated value, and then report the final value estimated. And they do that on a document called a form called the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report. There's a sample of it on page 319, and the sample will be 2 slides from now. Let's get the little note here about that. Okay, so on page 318, let's highlight Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. Use pattern. Okay, that's that 15-hour national class that appraisers need to take every 2 years. Here's that Uniform Standard of Professional Appraisal Practice. Down the bottom, it says Fannie Mae form number, what's that, 1004? This is their standard appraisal report. kind of looks like that property valuation we did, right? I was showing you how to do the CMAs and we add or subtract the value of that property. So look, they have subject properties information gets filled in here. Then they have comp 1, comp 2, comp 3. If they have more comps, that would be on additional pages. But they also fill out a bunch of other information, questions about is the real estate market steady, on the incline, on the decline? Are there any other factors? There's a lot of other information that they write into these reports. So it's a lot more detail oriented than the simple CMAs that we would have done. So on page 320, we'll highlight MAI, Member of the Appraisal Institutes. So that's the organization most appraisers will be a member of. And they could also become members of SRA, Senior Residential Appraisers, for general and residential appraisers, respectively. Specific credentials may be required when expert testimony is provided for court proceedings or before a public body such as a local zoning board. Now, New Jersey, I put this in a box. You probably should too. This is pertaining to us about the CMAs and BPOs and how we should never misrepresent them as being the equivalent of an appraisal, like a licensed appraiser would do. So New Jersey requires appraisals comply with state standards and be performed by a state licensed or certified appraiser. An exception is allowed in the rare event where a broker's price opinion is acceptable to a lender. And that's usually when they're refinancing or doing something of that, usually not for purchases. So the BPO should include a statement that indicates that the report should not be considered the equivalent of an appraisal prepared by a New Jersey licensed or certified real estate appraiser. So that statement should be on every page of your CMA or BPO. The statement should appear in the print size as large as the main text on the report, so it shouldn't be fine print. And any fees involved are payable to the agent's broker of record if you're doing a BPO. You have to get paid through your broker still, remember? Because who could pay you? Only your broker. So all real estate appraisals for any purpose must be done by a licensed or certified real estate appraiser. The only exception is for CMAs provided to sellers or buyers and to BPOs that are ordered by lenders. So this is when we as real estate agents conduct these valuations. A BPO is a little bit different than a CMA because a CMA is a presentation we're doing for sellers and buyers to let them know what the value of their property is worth, but it's a presentation. The BPO is more similar to an appraisal and requires a little bit more work, and we get paid for those, but got to get paid through your broker. You guys are interested in learning about becoming appraisers? I mean, we already went over what the process is, but you could find out more information here by contacting the licenses are handled by the Department of Law and Public Safety, Division of Consumer Affairs, State Board of Real Estate Appraisers at 124 Halsey Street, Newark. Or you can go to njconsumeraffairs.gov/REA to learn more about appraising. Okay. So you have those 4 types of appraiser licenses. First, you start off as that apprentice trainee. Then you graduate, and once you get enough experience under the belt, 2,000 hours, you could become a licensed residential appraiser who can only appraise residential properties under $1 million or up to $1 million, but not 1,000,001, only up to $1 million. The applicant for a certified residential appraiser, well, you'll need more education and more hours of experience. And then you could become a certified residential appraiser who has no limitations on the value of the property, the residential properties that you could appraise. But you could only appraise 1 to 4 family and single unit zone buildable lots. Anything else is considered commercial, and it would require a certified general appraiser to do those appraisals. Or you could be a certified residential appraisal doing appraisals on commercial properties under the supervision of a certified general appraiser. Because that's what you're going to need if you want to become a certified general appraiser. You have to have 3,000 hours of experience in 2.5 years or more, with at least 1,500 of those hours being spent on non-residential properties. So you need to have, even a certified residential appraiser has to have an apprenticeship of that 3,000 hours of experience under a certified general appraiser. And unlike residential appraisers, certified general appraisers have no monetary caps or limitations on the types of properties they can appraise. In every case, the required course of study includes a 15-hour national use PAP course, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. Okay. So you guys got those highlights?
Yep.
Okie dokie. And here's that one slide I have that has all that information on one slide, minus the specific class types that you need to take and what the acceptable substitutions are. You know, I don't have all that stuff on here. That you'd have to look at the page to get. But we got enough information here for us to study. This is all we need to know. You know, and I wrote down here at the bottom, FHA loans require appraisers to complete a special designation class certification to do appraisals on them. And it's important for them to get that because about half the appraisals out there are for residential property anyway. A little bit more than half are probably for FHA type loans. So the professional designations of appraisers is made through membership in their appraisal societies, and New Jersey requires that appraisals are performed as part of a federally related transaction. They must comply with state standards and be performed by state licensed or certified appraisers, not by real estate agents. We do CMAs and BPOs. CMA is a comparative market analysis. I got the definitions for both of them here for you. They're used by real estate licensees to help home sellers and buyers determine the current market value of their property using the sales comparison approach. And this is usually complimentary for free. Whereas a BPO, a broker's price opinion, is when licensees prepare valuation reports similar to the appraisal for banks. However, they must never be called appraisals, usually performed for a fee, which must be paid through your broker. And both CMAs and BPOs must include that disclosure statement in a font size no smaller than the average used on the report, stating this is not an appraisal and should not be considered the equivalent of one performed by a licensed or certified appraiser. And here I just got a couple more practice problems for you if you want to snap a picture and erase these and just like do the math problems and see if you can figure them out on your own. You know, I just added up a couple of these. So here's one for the question here and how to figure out compound and straight line. You want to snap a picture of that to practice later, maybe. And then here's one more that we could do right now. Let's see if you guys could do this on your own now without the instructions. If you purchased a property 3 years ago, it depreciated 2% per year. Today's value is $375. How much did you purchase the property for? First, calculate it using the straight line method and then calculate it using the compound method. So do the straight line method first and let me know when you guys have figured it out. And then I'll click on it once, and this one does not go step by step. It'll just expose the whole problem. So see if you guys can figure this out. You guys remember the steps. Remember, ask yourself a question about the question. What's step one? Start off with 100%, right? Step one, start off with 100%. Did it appreciate or depreciate? It depreciated, so you're going to be subtracting from 100%, right? And then are you trying to determine a current value or a past value? That'll determine whether you multiply or divide. You guys working on it?
Yeah, we're trying to figure it out now.
Yeah.
Is the straight line 398,936?
Let's see. Is that everybody still working on it, or everybody gets some kind of answer? Remember the value you're trying to figure out how much you purchased it for, so it has to be more than 375, which you said was what again?
I said 398,936.
So it's higher. So it sounds like it's in the right direction there. So let's take a look. That's what you got?
Yes, after I divided it.
There you go. So first step, number of years multiplied by depreciation rate, and then subtract because it depreciated from 100. And then you're going to divide that by today's value to figure out how much you bought it for 3 years ago using the straight line method. Okay, now do the same thing using the compound method, which instead of doing this 2 times 3 thing, you got to do the math problem once for each year. And let me know what you guys get with that.
$398,430.
Let's take a look. 398, 431 I came up with. But yeah, so compound method, you take 100 minus 2 is 0.98. Take the today's value divided by that 0.98 3 times, right? And then you get 398, 431. Probably just how the calculator rounded it. Okay.
So when it's appreciation, is that when you multiply?
If it's appreciation, you're going to add to 100% instead of subtract from 100%. So here, when you're doing 100%, we're doing it depreciated, so we're subtracting from 100%. If the problem says it appreciated, all you do is you add to 100%. So then it'll be like 1 point something.
Okay.
Or 102%, or 1.02 if it's a whole number you're putting in there.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, that's the end of this chapter. Look at that. So now we're going to do the key terms to review for chapter 16 here. Let me get that up. Key terms to review, chapter 16. There are 2 key terms to review in this chapter. Are you ready? Process of estimating value. What do we call the process of estimating value?
Appraisal.
An appraisal. 2 is A, correct. A rate of return demanded by investors in a particular area.
Cap rate.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Capitalization rate.
Yes, the cap rate or capitalization rate is correct. 4 is B. Similar nearby property recently sold. What do we call those properties?
Comparables.
A comp or comparable, correct. 5 is C. Extra, that contributes to the owner's satisfaction, like clean air, nice views, and so on.
Amenity.
It's an amenity. 1 is D. An independent person trained to provide an unbiased estimate or opinion of value.
Appraiser.
3 is E, appraiser. Analysis of income, including rental and other factors that are not part of the real estate, like a concession stand, etc.
Gross income multiplier.
Correct. 10 is F, gross income multiplier. A loss of value due to any cause or condition.
Depreciation.
7 is G, depreciation, correct. A loss of value due to factors beyond the property's boundaries.
External obsoletes.
Correct. 8 is H, external obsolescence. A loss of value due to worn or outmoded, that's like outdated features.
Functional obsolescence.
Functional obsolescence. 9 is I. Okay, next to letter J, I want you to, at the end of the line, I want you to write to compare income producing properties. So it says analysis of rental income used roughly in a sales comparison approach. And right there, to compare income producing properties. At the end of the line, to compare income producing properties. To compare income producing properties.
Gross rent multiplier.
Yes, the GRM, the gross rent multiplier, 11 is J. An appraisal technique that analyzes the cost to build.
Um, capitalization rate.
We already did cap rate too.
Oh,
Yeah, 4 was B.
oh, sorry, I missed
So
that.
an appraisal technique that analyzes the cost to build.
Cost approach.
It's the cost approach. So 6 is K. Analysis of value of property using return on investment.
Income approach.
Income approach. And there's 2 approaches we generally use, the CAP or GRM or the GIM. But so income approach, if you want right underneath that or right after that, CAP or GRM, using CAP or GRM. Cap rates or GRM. So 13 was L. And use of land that yields the most money possible.
Highest and best use.
12 is M, the highest and best use. Okay. Key terms 2. What a property actually sells for.
Market price.
Market price. 1 is A. The loss of value due to wear and tear.
Mm,
Loss of value due to wear and tear.
Physical deterioration.
deterioration.
Yep. 3 is
Deterioration.
B, physical deterioration. Correct. A location and buyer's willingness to pay more for certain locations. When you find that perfect place that you want to build your house,
Situs.
situs or situs. We're gonna sit us right here, right? 8 is C. Analysis of values received by different appraisal approaches.
Analysis of values.
Reconciliation.
Reconciliation, 4 is D, correct. The present worth of future benefits. Present worth of future benefits.
Market value.
Simply value, just value.
Value. Okay.
It didn't tell you enough information to figure out what kind of value.
Mhm.
But value is actually defined as the present worth of future benefits. So 11 is E. Cost to rebuild using today's materials and techniques.
Reproduction cost.
Using today's materials is not going to reproduce it exactly as it was. Think of like an old historic church or something, burns down. It had all that beautiful granite materials and innate, detailed carvings and such.
Replacement costs.
It's going to be the replacement cost. It's not going to be the reproduction, because reproduction will reproduce an exact duplicate or exact copy. That's what reproduction does. Replacement cost is just you're replacing it with something else that serves the same purpose, but it's not an exact duplicate. So 5 is F. A price that would be paid by an informed buyer. What do our CMAs help figure out?
Sales comparison approach.
Yeah, but what do they help figure out? What are we trying to determine with a sales, with the CMA, which
Market
uses the sales
value.
comparison approach? The market's value, the market value, correct. 2 is G. An appraisal technique that analyzes the sales price of comparable properties. Usually
Sales comparison
residential,
approach.
huh?
Sales comparison approach.
Yes, sales comparison approach. 7 is H. The cost to rebuild exactly using materials like the original.
Reproduction cost.
Reproduction cost. 6 is I. Principle that no one pays more if the same can be had for less.
Substitution.
Yes, 10 is J, substitution. And a parcel of real estate that's being appraised is referred to as
Subject property.
the subject property. It's the subject of our conversation. It is the subject property. Correct. And that concludes chapter 16.